it is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Valérie Gonzalez, who specializes in Islamic art, history, and aesthetics. And many of you know her and know of her publications. Valérie studied at example where she gained a PhD, and she also made research scholarships and grants from various institutions worldwide. For example, the Christie Furnishers Institute in Florence, the Getty Research Center, the Other Hand Program at MIT, the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. She's very active in both teaching and research, having published numerous articles and books, such as Beauty in Islamic Culture, and more recently, the Aesthetic Hybridity in Mughal Painting, 1526 to 1658, which was published by Ashgate in 2015. Valérie is now finalizing a book on the metaphysics of Islamic ornament, the sacred and the sensible in Islam, to be published by IB Tauris in 2027? Yes, optimistically. So tonight, Valérie is going to talk to us about some amazing Qur'ans from the Timurid period, written on Chinese colored paper painted in gold. So we're very much looking forward to this. Thank you very much. To the colleagues and friends who are online, please write your comments or questions in the chat, and I will read it. I will read them out loud at the end of the presentation. I'm just going to dim the lights here so that we have a visual, the best visual experience of this amazing material.
Thank you, Anna, very much for inviting me and giving me a platform to discuss a concept which is very fashionable lately, the concept of mediation. And that's the topic today of my presentation. And it is also part of the discussions that I developed in my this concept of mediation. You probably heard it, and you probably very frequently encounter it in the art historical literature, in particular the Islamic art historical literature, where you have mediation, the mediator, the intermediary, all over the places. Well, but that's precisely the question. So today in this presentation, I wish to discuss this issue of mediation because it has bothered me a little bit for some time. Because it is actually used too loosely, even abused or misused in the literature. Since Oleg Grabar published in 1992 his famous book, The Mediation of Ornament, the term of mediation itself and related terminology appear regularly in this field of studies without always making sense, and even without challenging the way Oleg Grabar is using it in his book. The recent rise of the episteme of material religion and the mediation theories it has developed has only reinforced this problem. So today, I will address this problem and I will examine a few examples in which it is problematically used and how we can discuss and how we can see we can look at the material beyond this issue of mediation and how the concept of mediation is used in order to fill a gap or to designate a gray zone of things that we don't really understand that are happening in the material itself. And that's the point. So you have here an image of one of these Qur'an, which is the example that I will use today, but not only. First, it's important to problematize this concept of mediation within the epistemology of Islamic art history itself. I cannot just jump and tell you, oh, look, here there is mediation, or is there, or maybe not, there is no mediation, on these examples, we need to have the conceptual and epistemological framework in order to understand the scope of the problem. So in his book, first of all, in his book, Oleg Grabar posits that Islamic ornament mediates between the beholder and the artwork, be it architecture or an object of whatever kind. Since then, meaning since 1992, this idea has become a certitude and has been left completely unchallenged, and literally a certitude. For example, in an article, one may read at the of an important scholar, one may read at the beginning of an argument as an established fact, abstract, or I quote, abstract ornamental designs mediating between viewers and objects, blah, 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 blah. It's a fact, it's a premise. The same, so that just, let's go through just the material en passant. We will return into it, but just to get, for you to get an idea of how the mediation can be used to get you, so that you get a sense of the complexity that we are facing. So the same certitude appears in a study on the Alhambra, which is a good point of entry to the discussion about mediation. But here I need a longer quotation so that we can go more in depth into the concept itself. So pay attention first to the phrasing of this excerpt, which is part of a study on the Alhambra, and then we will look at the image, the corresponding image. Here you have some views on the decoration of the Alhambra. That's the decoration that everyone knows. Now I'm reading the explanation, I mean, one of the statements by this scholar. In the field of Islamic art and architectural history, the theoretical premises of such reciprocal interaction between architecture, objects, and beholders have long since been developed by Oleg Grabar in his conceptualization of the role of ornament as a crucial mediator of the aesthetic experience. Grabar developed this thesis in the Mediation of Ornament primarily through separate studies of three modes of decoration: writing, geometry, and vegetal motifs. In the Alhambra, better pronounced, in the Alhambra, the three modes typically appear together in the same architectural space and frequently overlap, as the present study on the Alhambra will demonstrate. Each mode, in turn, serves as a mediator for the others. Now, this quotation is describing what we are seeing. A few observations can be made about the Alhambra. That's a point. That's a very good point of entry to problematize the issue. Above all, does ornament, as you are looking at it, does ornament look like a mediator between the beholder and the artwork, which is the building itself in this case? So imagine it just plain without the decoration. So the ornament mediates between the viewer and the artwork, which is the architecture, but is the architecture without the ornament the artwork and not the ornament itself? And why is not architecture itself the artwork, the mediator between the beholder and the ornamental artwork? And why this ornament is not the core of the experience of the whole thing after all? Well, there is a whole set of interrogations. I just want you to sense that something is not quite right in this theory of ornament as mediation in the context of Islamic visual culture. However, with Grabar, the problem is not his misuse of the concept of mediation, it is that his theory doesn't work. When you analyze the material itself, you have all these questions that arise and it doesn't fit. Now, this is something that I'm dealing with my book on the metaphysics of ornament right now, but it just gives you, this is not what I want to discuss. What I want to discuss is the misuse of the concept itself. In particular, here we have a good example. So when we look at the concept conceptually, in terms of the thought and what mediation and mediating signify, any mediating process occurs when two terms are linked through a third middle term, namely the mediator or intermediary or intercessor. We may describe this triadic structure along these lines. Term A is in relationship with term B through term C. This relationship establishes itself through a dynamic tension motivated by a specific intention, whereby term A aims to reach out to term B by instrumentalizing term C, namely the mediator. The important point in this process of mediation is that there is a hierarchy. A hierarchy is inherent in the mediating process. Although term C is the enabler of the mediating relationship, its agency remains secondary to the agency of terms A and B, because term A and B are the most important determinants of the whole process and of its results. So, when you look at Islamic ornament, can we attribute the status of the mediator, this inferior status of the mediator in respect to the reality of the art itself? Then just here, just look. Sometimes it's just about looking at the material. Sorry. So you see here, you have this little diagram that I just so that you get just this very useful tool here. So you see the beholder, ornament, the artwork. You see the hierarchy. You have the middle term, and I do not think that ornament is a middle term in the reality of Islamic art. Whatever is the art, representational, abstract, ornamental, whatever is the nature of the art, ornament is not a mediator. Now, you have the clear example of mediation at work in material religion. There are many examples, but of course the most, the most familiar here in the frame of Western culture is Christian mediation through the portraiture of Jesus, Mary, and the saints. So, indeed, here we have a process of mediation whereby the faithful uses the portrait of Jesus to relate spiritually to the absent religious figure itself, Jesus himself. So with this example of this recent portrait by a Spanish artist during the Holy Week in Sevilla, the Semana Santa, artists are proposing new imageries, and they go out in the street and they parade sculptures and paintings. And those materialities are indeed mediating between the faithful and the holy figures of Christianity. So here we have this mediation. It's a clear example, and it's a clear example that shows you that the portrait will never be a replacement for the figure itself, and will never acquire the same value as the holy figure itself. It goes without saying. So that's a good example of how, as well, we can understand the hierarchy which is at work in the mediation process. Now, again, to continue the problematization of the term, of the concept of mediation, The quotation on the Alhambra says that basically the varied, so I go back to it. I want you to be equipped with all these issues and diagrams and images in mind, so that then we can deal with the very complex Timurid Qur'ans. The quotation on the Alhambra basically tells us that because the varied ornaments intersect physically and aesthetically, they are mediators for one another. But based on which logic? There is no observable hierarchy, and many parts, and actually you can see again, just see, look, many parts actually comprise only pairs of motifs. So there cannot be a mediating relationship, because in the mediating relationship, you have three terms. At any rate, clearly the author of the quotation confuses mediator and medium in art historical parlance. And it confuses as well mediation with intersectionality and intermediality in art. About intersectionality and intermediality, they concern the interrelations and interplay between different media and forms within a single work or as part of a broader artistic phenomenon. There is no restriction of numbers of forms or media for the intermedial and intersectional process to occur. Accordingly, one medium or motif can thematize, evoke, or imitate elements of the other. Similarly, different media or elements can be blended to create richer and more complex configurations. Actually, mediation can be part of these relational aesthetic games, but it's just one among many different possibilities. The task of the scholar then is consequently to identify what type of game or relationship between the different constituents of a given artwork is at stake. Now we can look at those extraordinary Qur'ans. So now clearly the beauty, the astonishing beauty is due to the fact that we have the use of the Ming painted paper, polychromatic paper, painted with gold imageries. So just have a look at the colors, the extraordinary opticality and materiality and textures of this Quran, based on, obviously, the Chinese source material which is employed. And look at the variety. Something which is important is to understand is the variety of presentation of the golden imageries. So you have those which are presented upside down, like here, but you also have those who are presented mimetically, like a landscape. And you have also the use of the imagery as a sort of a flickering background, but still you perceive the landscapes. There are animals, there are birds, there are fruits, flora, fauna, and all, of course, play with the colors. Now, how to deal with this material? So this material has been studied in a book, in an article included in the collective book. This article was written by Ilse Sturkenboom and some other scholars, and the article is titled Chinese Decorated Paper in Persianate Manuscripts of the 15th Century, Materiality, Use, and Meaning. So this piece pertains to a rich volume edited by Lorenz Korn and Berenike Metzler, published in 2022, so it's very recent. And this collected book is titled The Intermediary of Writing, Text-Image Relations in Early Modern Islamic Cultures. So my discussion now is based on one of the findings in this article that is cited here. You have an excerpt here of the findings. But before that, before I read, I want to clarify something about the title of the book itself, The Intermediary of Writing, which actually refers to a chapter in Grabar's book, The Mediation of Ornament. So a clarification is needed here. In basic theory, writing is a material intermediary between the world of speech and thought and the material world. In Islam, writing calligraphy, so writing and calligraphy, are the intermediaries between the faithful and the divine, because there is no other material mediator in the Islamic context. The question is, how does this parameter, basic parameter of knowledge, help us to understand the aesthetic ontology and working of Islamic artifacts at large, and on these Qur'ans in particular? Intermediary of writings, yes, I just described what it means, but how does this parameter of knowledge help us to explain this combination of Chinese source material and the Quranic manuscript? It doesn't. But the article that I just mentioned attempts to enlighten us about what is going on in those Quranic constructs. So now let us look at the finding itself. I'm quoting, and you have the citation before your eyes. The ambiguity between the gold images as a medium on which to write and an intermediary agent that conveys meaning is beautifully seen in Quran manuscripts on Chinese paper. So we have two terms here related to the terminology of mediation: medium and intermediary. Explain this. So first, the parameter of writing as intermediary, as just defined, is irrelevant here to explain as a tool, as a critical tool to explain what is going on. Second, the authors of the article talk about the meaning of the Chinese gold iconographies, but they do not specify what it is, and I would not venture to guess what is the original Chinese meaning of these paintings. I have my guess, but that's not the point. So we have this idea that those imageries are conveying meaning. But when you say that, you have to say, what is the meaning? Which meaning? What is the content? So nothing. No specification about this. Third, and crucially, not only it's not clear how this notion of intermediary works in the manuscript's construct, but also unclear is, in the phrasing of the quotation, the difference between the medium and the intermediary. To clarify these gray zones, I propose to logically and critically examine the Qur'ans themselves in my own way, how they are constituted with different layers, and I want also to try to identify the different aesthetic ontologies that these different layers that we observe embody. I will begin with the medium of the items mentioned in the quotation. Let us recall, in art, the medium is the source material of which artworks are made. Painting, ceramics, wood, metal, canvases, oil painting, and so on. And that's what we mean in the art parlance, in the art historical parlance, by the medium. It's not the medium as it's not the medium understood as also as a mediator, like the medium that mediates between the living and the dead. in occultism, for example. When we talk in art, when we talk about the medium, we talk about the source material. So there is no mediation really at work when we mention the medium of the art, of the artwork. We're talking about the source material. So in this respect, the medium is very different from the mediator. Also, crucially, the medium is the material carrier of another constituent of the artwork, theoretically, very basically, the carrier of the artwork subject matter. So the artwork is basically made of a medium and a subject matter. And when, in modernism and postmodernism, where we have the elimination of content, we have a conflation of the medium with the subject matter, so that the subject matter is the medium and the medium is the subject matter. This is minimalism, for example. But we have to have it bear in mind this duality, this binary that constitute an artwork, the medium and the subject matter. So what do we have? And you see, it sounds like I'm stating the obvious, but we need those tools in order to understand what is going on. So what we have here, maybe we can just go to another, not this one which is, sorry, another one. So thus, now I'm reasoning. Thus, the medium of the Quran is not a raw material, but a complete artwork itself of Chinese origin, the Ming gold painting of architecture, flora and fauna, being the subject matter of this Chinese artwork, and the polychromatic paper, its medium. In short, we are dealing with a complex configuration of an artwork as the medium of another artwork. In the article in question, the subject matter of the Chinese artwork, namely the gold paintings, those gold imageries, it is viewed, this iconography is viewed as both a medium and an intermediary. This viewing poses two problems. The first problem emerges from a questioning. Between what and what do the gold paintings mediate? Between the Chinese art world and the Muslim art world? Or between the paper and the Arabic calligraphy? Well, none of that works for a simple reason. The gold paintings belong to both layers of the Quranic books construct, the Chinese and the Islamic layers of this construct. So the gold paintings belong to both. So they are not an intermediary. They cannot be an intermediary because they belong to both layers. And in both the source material and the Quranic manuscript, the gold paintings constitute the subject matter, not the medium. And I will contest here, and I will argue that those imageries are part of the subject matter of the Quranic manuscripts. They are not a mediation that is in between, the paper and the Arabic script. They are mingled with the Arabic scripts, and for a very good reason, that is phenomenologically, when you look at when you experience those Qur'ans, you need to go through the gold paintings, because very often the writing is not even legible easily. Literally, the gold images in some cases are on the way of the reading process. They are literally part of the subject matter of the Islamic manuscript. So they cannot be a medium, and they cannot be a mediator. They are a subject matter in both cases, in both layers of the construct. In that capacity, the paintings cannot reside in between those layers and cannot even be called the medium of anything in aesthetic ontological terms, even though technically they are, together with the paper, the Quran's medium. But aesthetically, they are no longer a medium. They are part of the artworks, because we have an artwork that is constructed above, that is constructed with another artwork, and which is processed through, one is processed through the other. In fact, the painting, what the paintings attest and manifest is an aesthetic phenomenon. Now, that's another aesthetic phenomenon. We have another tool that we can use in order to pinpoint what exactly we have here, which is called, what these paintings attest and manifest is an aesthetic phenomenon of transcultural intermediarity that is the product of a particular transformational phenomenology at work in those Qur'ans. And thus, this phenomenology is the phenomenology of transduction. So the Chinese artwork, I will explain what is transduction means, but the Chinese artwork, just to describe with simple terms, the Chinese artwork has been used to fashion another artwork of a different genre and identity, namely the Quranic manuscripts. So the act of refashioning transforms or transmutes, doesn't mediate. Thanks to this act, the Chinese artwork has become an Islamic artwork, thereby completely dissolving the technical ontology of medium that the Chinese artwork initially possessed. So that's basically the simple words to explain that what we have exactly at work here is a phenomenon of transduction. Now, I didn't invent that term. It is Gilbert Simondon, the French philosopher, who brought this concept, which is a biological concept initially, into philosophy. And a translator of Gilbert Simondon's work actually gives a very nice explanation of what Gilbert Simondon argues in his work about transduction. And here you have the quotation, so that it becomes a little bit more complicated, but actually we have, I think, an excellent tool here to use in order to understand what is going on in those Qur'ans. Alors, I'm reading. Transduction is Gilbert Simondon's key concept for understanding processes of differentiation and of individuation in a number of fields, including scientific disciplines, social and human sciences, technological devices, and artistic domains. Originating from the sciences and crucially developed in its philosophical implication by Simondon, transduction refers to a dynamic operation by which energy is actualized, moving from one state to the next in a process that individuates new materialities. To be inferred from this definition is the fact that transducers create new materialities, whereas subdued by nature mediators and intermediaries do not. The intermediary does shape the relationship between the two different agencies involved in the mediation it helps create, but it does not alter the reality of those agencies. Jesus is not transformed by his portrait. So how do we apply Simondon's theories to the Quranic manuscripts? Let's look at them again. Here. So the transducer is the Islamic manuscript. Yeah, I think. So the transducer is the Islamic manuscript, and the transduced is the Chinese paper with golden imageries, the whole thing forming a new individuated materiality of Islamic nature. The imageries themselves constitute the visible traces of the transductional operations that have produced the manuscripts. As visible traces, they retain their original aesthetic status of subject matter. We are back to what I said before. Now paired together with the Quranic writing in the new Islamic aesthetic space. What changes, on the other hand, we are not yet finished soon. What changes, on the other hand, in this new space is the meaning that the Chinese paintings originally conveyed in their originally Ming environment. While the imageries keep their Chineseness or their Chinese identity visually, they no longer mean what they were meant to mean in China, whatever that meaning was. This is due to another process, an effect, more exactly. This is due to the effect of decontextualization of the paintings in the Quranic space, which I would say automatically desemantizes the Chinese iconography, namely, which erases the iconography's semantics, given its irrelevance in the new Quranic space. The result of this desemantization is the morphing. Here I need another tool. The result of this desemantization is the morphing of the Chinese iconography into a-signifying figural tautologies, which now function as pure patterns of figural order, playfully mixed with Arabic calligraphy. Importantly, thus morphed into figural ornament, these iconographies, let's go back to, let's look again at those iconographies, playfully mixed with Arabic calligraphy. Importantly, thus morphed into figural ornament, these iconographies do not present any potential doctrinal danger in the Quranic environment. And here we have another example in which we have a decoration with figures, with animal zoomorphic decoration on the Qibla wall in the Great Mosque of Cordoba, which dates to the Umayyad, the 10th century part of the mosque built by Al-Hakam. So this is the Qibla of the Al-Hakam part of the construction in the Mosque of Cordoba. And you can see here you have this zoomorphic decoration that obviously on the Qibla wall does not signify anything. It is an a-signifying figural tautology. And what is a tautology? It's a very simple, very good tool, very simple tool. What are they? Rabbits or whatever. A bird. A bird is a bird is a bird. That's a tautology. We have no danger in it. These are not representation, because a representation is actively producing, delivering a discourse. And that's the difference between representation and figural ornament. Figural ornaments are tautologies of tautological figurations that do not signify or do not deliver a discourse. Otherwise, why do we call them figural ornament and not figural representation? Because there is a clear difference in the function of those objects, of those constructs. And this is apart from another category, and this is something that I discuss in my book. So, if you want to know more, you will read my book in the future. There is another category of figural ornaments, which are symbolic ornaments. But here, in the context of the Qibla work, I don't see what could be the symbolism. And the symbolic ornaments are not representations either. For theoretical reason, I will not enter into this. I guess you got your load of theories today. But so we have actually, like on the Qibla wall, on the Qur'ans, these are figural ornaments. So that's how I identify. And they are figural ornaments, and as such, they are a subject matter in partnership with the Arabic calligraphy on the Quranic folios. Now, a last thing, and this will be the end, to note, though, it is the transduction itself that neutralizes and mutes the representational workings of the Chinese gold paintings. Not that their formal treatment, because we have a great variety, and the article says, oh, because they are put upside down, the idea of putting the landscapes and architectscapes upside down is meant, there is an intention to remove the meaning by positioning those imageries upside down. But that's not correct, because you have multiple cases. It's the transduction itself that through the decontextualization, the decementization, and all these processes that I have described, remove the visual discourse. And then the artist can play with these figural ornaments. And this is actually a very common practice in Islamic book art, to deconstruct and to play with figural ornaments, whether they are symbolic or not, more or less symbolic. Then we need to, if you want to exactly know when you have a symbol and when you don't have a symbol, it's case studies can only help with figuring this out. But as I said, it's a practice in book art and album art, especially in the early modern period, and especially in those albums that again mix Chinese artworks and Islamic artworks. And you see how they are deconstructed, but not only those Chinese artworks. You can see, you can identify, and there are also Persian copies of this Chinese art. So you see the bird, the bird at the bottom left, the bird is dead. No, the bird is not dead. It's just the image is just, I call that aporetic pictorial games. It blocks the meaning, the visual discourse, to turn those imageries into actually ornaments, not decorations, ornaments. Again, these are different things, but ornaments, a sort of ornaments as patterned elements, ornaments as structures. And you have structures upside down, and you have deconstructive structures like this one with this Chinese image. When you look, you wonder, where is, the thing going through what, which plane, the foreground plane, the background plane. You have this construction here, which is playful. And why? Because actually the exact visual discourse doesn't count so much. What counts is the imagery, the manipulation of the structure here. You have a clear example with those two figures and the horse. And you see, so you can just look at it and trying to figure out how things are constructed. And they are not mimetically constructed, definitely not. So to conclude, the final, I would say, and I'm using Simondon's terminology, the final individuated product issued from the pairing of the Ming patterned figurations with Arabic script in the Timurid Qur'ans belong to the broader category of ornamented calligraphy that appears on all kinds of media and situation in Islamic art. Actually, we have the same type of situation in which writing and ornaments form a partnership, an osmosis, I would say. And the Qur'ans and the Chinese imageries are no different from those ornaments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Lights on again. Thank you both. Thank you very much, Valérie, for this very interesting and rather complicated subjects. I'm just, before I open the floor for questions, yes. I just have one. I mean, I think I haven't read the article, I haven't read the book, but I'm just talking about your own ideas, what you bring to this subject, and this idea that the gilded decoration is not a mediator. I think it's quite convincing. But what I wanted to ask you is, what is sort of is missing is the agency of the creator of this book. Is how this artifact was put together. So,
are you talking about the makers?
Well, I'm talking about the choices that whoever put these Qur'ans together made in doing that. So in choosing this paper, and then the calligrapher who wrote the Quran. So I'm just thinking about.
Well, there are many things. It's not that I covered the whole subject.
No,
I mean, so many questions.
I just wanted to see whether you could say something about that process, because of course that process influences then the process of ornamentation and the relationship between calligraphy and ornament. Yeah, I don't know if
so. First of all, I think that the makers of these Qur'ans, they practice their art based on collective habits. It's not one person who decides, oh, I like this. We are not in the, in a framework of Renaissance artists who said, oh, I am Michelangelo, I am Leonardo da Vinci, I will do that because I think that. No, these are collective practices informed by collective habits. So what we have here at stake is that anything that comes from China, and we know that since the beginning of Islam, any art coming from China is appreciated and is used either in ceramics, paintings, in all possible media, is used as a source material, a source of inspiration. It is an art that was appreciated. And we have all the mythology also about the Chinese artists versus the Greek artists and so on and so forth. We have also the mythology around it. So there is this, and this is a collective outlook, Islamic outlook on the Chinese art world. So anything that can be processed and appropriated based on appreciation is integrated into the practice. Whether it's actually making Qur'ans, but now we know also that the same paper was used to produce other books as well. Not only Qur'ans, it's not specifically, so we're not talking about specifically Quranic makers, but bookmakers. It's like the same thing when you have those albums and then the Qur'ans, you see the similarities, you see common habits, common patterns of practices. So that's how things are working here. And that's how, so we have an Islamic outlook on the Chinese art world here, basically at work, and based on appreciation, but also based on processing, because the meaning of those landscapes cannot be just copied, slavishly copied. There is a process of individuation, of transduction. That's why I'm using this author, because that's exactly what is happening. You have a processing here that is very complex, where this artwork, Chinese artwork, which are those beautiful papers, polychromatic papers painted with golds, were appreciated maybe for their meanings, but mainly for their textures and visuality and opticality and textuality. Not big texture, not textuality, texture, sorry, texture. So that's something that has to do with structure.
Right.
So that's if it answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Any other question? Yes?
Hi. I love Islamic art. I've been studying it for a while, and I love the calligraphy, geometry, arabesque, all of it. When I looked at the Qur'anic pages, they're so beautiful to look at. But I've read the 5-volume commentary of the Holy Quran itself and what each word means. So the beauty of the words, they don't actually need all this decoration because the words are so beautiful. And the Prophet led a life of humility, humbleness. He led a life where people couldn't even recognize who he was because he wore the most simple of clothes. Nobody knew it was him. They would mistake him for his companions because he was dressed so much like in the cheapest clothes you could find. He believed in distributing wealth to the poor. He believed in not wealth and extravagance like the Qur'ans are. So there's a disconnection between the meanings of the words and the aesthetics, which are, I'm assuming it's real gold they paint with, because I've studied that. So when the Prophet lived a life of humility, and then you have these Qur'ans completely contradicting the religion itself, I love to look at them, but when you read the commentary, there's a difference between the meaning and the aesthetics, because the Prophet would never choose gold to decorate things. He had all the wealth in the world and distributed it amongst the poor and everything. He would never keep it. He believed in charity so highly. And these books, they are so expensive to make, the process, the skill, the craftsmanship.
Here. But here we are dealing with ethics, with Islamic ethics, and we know that there are a lot of contradictions between ethics and material culture. And for example, you have the same issue with representation, with representation of living beings. Sometimes you have groups in certain period, in certain society, that decided to erase the faces because ethically they didn't see it, that it was licit. So this is part of the ethics, and it's not part of my discussion. It's important. However, even concerning ethics and the ethos of Islam and how it is translated materially, there is another aspect to Islamic ethics, which is the emphasis on beauty as a theological concept, not as decoration, as a theological concept, and also as a practice. And now I'm writing about this in my book, but there is a whole ethical background that allows actually the development of very sophisticated practices, artistic practices, that processually then entail the use of very precious, sophisticated materials, artistically speaking, because you talk about gold, but gold in terms of as an expensive materiality, or gold as a beautiful materiality. The mantle on the Kaaba very often includes gold embroideries. So if you look at ethics and practices, then you can see the gaps, the overlappings. But what I'm dealing here with, which are studied particularly in my book, is the ethical background that is centered on the concept of beauty that allows all these developments in the practice.
Any other? Yes?
Can I respond to my neighbour here and also say, I mean, I'm an interloper on all of this. It's a long way from my expertise, but it seems to me that the use of the most expensive paper possible in the time is an act of deference. And so that's saying this is the holy text. It is so important as a text that it merits the best quality materials we can possibly use. And that's also perhaps an act of proselytization. So Islam is still relatively new. It's only 700 or 800 years old by the time these manuscripts are being copied. And so there's a way of showing this new text needs the best quality materials. And I also wonder if, in fact, another way of being deferential towards the text is to make it harder to read. So you were saying the text doesn't need the complexity, but in fact, what the complexity does is it slows down the reading process. And so that can actually make the assimilation of the text a more profound experience. So I wouldn't see it as contradictory to the importance of the text.
The thing is, images are not allowed in mosques, and the text is being covered by the gold. So the text is the most sacred in hierarchy.
It's not allowed. I mean,
Religiously,
it
I'm
is
only
allowed
talking religiously.
because you do have the material that tells you that it's, at least in the past, it was allowed. Now today, I wouldn't say. But to go back to what you say, we have to have it in mind that there are indications, there are evidences, not indication, that those gold papers were used for a wide range of books, not only Qur'ans, adab books. So meaning it was more like a consummate practice in this period, of course confined to circles in which the means they had the wealth that enabled to produce such books. But it's a practice that is that goes beyond the Quranic makings.
Yes.
Practice. Yeah.
Any other question or comment? Let's.
So, if there are none, if there are no questions, I could offer
Please, yes.
a comment from an ignorance that is quite stubborn, should I say. I was fascinated by your analysis of text initially, the quotation from
Of what?
quotation around.
Quotations,
right,
how people
yeah.
say, what people say about them.
I mean, I know nothing about art, but I can read texts around it.
Yeah, that's why
Exactly. And they need to be unpicked. And I wonder whether, in fact, the implication of what you're saying is that one should go rather further. The word ornament came out to me as an intruder, an unnecessary level of confusion. Why not just dispose of it? What would you lose if you lost the word ornament?
I didn't understand it really.
Well, we seem to have the notion of a separation of an object, something ornamental stuck on it, and the view. You've got this triad, and the receiver thereof.
Yeah.
And what I'm suggesting is that this is an unhelpful complication. We merely have the viewer and the object.
Which includes
Why?
ornament.
But why should you separate ornament from something that it's stuck on?
But that's
exactly.
Take it further.
that's exactly what I said.
The notion of ornament.
That was
should-
what
it's-
Grabar had sort of.
But you see, it's repeated all over the places. That's the problem.
Fine, so get rid of it is one thing. And then, I mean, I would like to go further and look at your text, but I can't do that now because I can't follow enough of it. But it seems to me that we're always looking around for appropriate metaphors, and you or this philosopher has come up with transduction.
Transduction, yeah.
And I'm not quite sure how helpful that is. Etymologically, of course, it means what it suggests. And if it's a term in scientific discourse, particular processes involving energy, is that really?
I think it's perfect because actually,
or an artistic.
I think it's a perfect critical tool because there do exist processes of mediation in material religion. They do. So we do have those separations. The portrait of Jesus is separated from its figure.
Okay, but what is transduction?
So we do have different situations, but with a lot of Islamic art that is described as, mediations. There is a chapter in Histories of Ornament produced in Harvard, Grand Pomp and everything. All the superstars have written in there. And what do you have? You have a chapter called Medieval Mediations, and it relates to ornamental mediations in Turkey, Persia, blah, 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 the whole thing. Mediations, they are called mediations. They are not mediations, they are transactions. Because the mediation is not, you know, the mediation can be the artist who is taking, you know, a voyage from one place to the other. He's a mediator, yeah? He mediates ideas from one place to the other. Let's say a boundary between two countries can be a mediator, so that we can have ornament in Iran and then ornament in the Ottoman domain, and then there is a contact zone. There are exchanges of ideas. So the mediators in those cases are the external agencies, but the art itself, there is no mediation, because you have Ottoman ornament, you have Persian ornament, you have Central Asian ornament, and you have different styles, different things. And there you have the creative energy that allows the same practice to produce individuated materialities, nothing to do with mediation.
Okay.
Okay, let's
Ornament.
let's see what's in the chat. So Ilse Sturkenboom, thank you very much for this lecture, and also for the attention for the edited volume Writing as Intermediary and for my essay in it. The whole volume can be downloaded here. A partial quote displayed multiple times during this lecture can be found in its full length, and of course in a network of other sentences other sentences on page 216. I would be thankful for your thoughts and feedback via email, and there is the email here. You are also invited to follow our ERC project Global Deco paper and on Instagram. So thank you for those links, and we can actually send them to you later on.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then Simon O'Meara, firstly, thank you very much for a very stimulating lecture. Secondly, I found your theorizing of figural ornament significant for scholarship and immensely helpful. But in the particular case of the Timurid Quran is the page with the upside down Chinese painting evidence that the calligrapher was in fact concerned that the painting might in fact remain representational? I suspect not, but a few more words from you on this occurrence would be great to hear. Thank you.
It's definitely a possibility. It's definitely a possibility, but because we see this practice of putting images upside down in a variety of situations and media, it indicates that it's more like a habit than a particular act in this particular Quran, in which you find the landscape upside down, because you have the bird on the branch, which is put upside down in the context of an album, which is not a priori a religious context.
Yeah, that's
so
a bit different, isn't it? I mean, an album is different.
But as I said, in any case, the process of transduction itself entails the irrelevance of the meaning of those necessarily of those imageries. But it's a possibility. I wouldn't say no. But we have to have in mind that we have evidences of a practice here that is articulated and very sophisticated of appropriating images and playing aporetic games with them.
Yeah, because together with the painting upside down, you have a lot that are not upside down.
Yeah, and a lot of them are not upside down. So, and we don't know, maybe it was the same, because what I showed was one Quran. So it might be the same. It's the same guy.
There are some that have the.
He said, I will put it upside down and I will put it in the right way.
There are some that have the Chinese gilded representation on a side.
Yeah, on the side, upside down. These are more like plays of structure, which is definitely at stake in pattern art, which is ornament.
I would also say that it may be because of the size of the paper.
Yeah,
And
also
actually
there are
that
probably practicalities,
You know.
also, but I think there is a liking of those games. Definitely to see that, like you see the bird, it's either the bird is dead or why is it the bird? And then you have the horse. The horse has the, how do you call, the harness, which is goes behind the folio, behind the railings of the image, and then reappear, disappear. These are poetic games. These are games of structure that literally challenge the logic of representation. The deconstruct. This is deconstructivist. It's a deconstructivist practice.
Any other comments here? Saima Majid says, thank you, Valerie. I enjoyed the lecture very much. Lots to think about.
Who's that? Ah, yes.
Any other question or comments? You must be
Too
tired.
heavy. Too heavy.
Okay, well, thank you very
heaviness
much
of
again for
conception.
coming, and thank you, Valerie.